Zendikar Rising Spoilers, Day 4. We're going to talk about Bolt lands. It's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about our new cEDH staple that has just entered the MTG Multiverse in Zendikar Rising. The video starts right now.
Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below.
Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. I'm Jake. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. Joel is off somewhere. He's figuring out why Skype is awful, which is the reason why two of us are not in this video reviewing these cards today. If you like these spoiler videos, click like, click subscribe. It's the best way to support the channel with just the click of a button. And now, without further ado, I'm going to talk to you about some cards. Check us out on Patreon. It might be a good fit. Every level gets access to the Discord, and there's giveaways and other stuff. It's fun. So, Joel left off yesterday with this Malachor Blood Priest here, so we're going to pick up right here with the Fearless Fledgling. One white, one other. Landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Fearless Fledgling. It gains flying until end of turn. This is really, really good. This is going to be a limited all-star. Land is something that you just inevitably do in limited, so the fact that this is going to be a card that gains flying, gets bigger, it's a very good threat. I like the showcase art here as well of the same card. I'm excited to see how this set affects things. The fact that these cards here, these Modal DFCs, Double-Faced Cards. Let's talk about Kabira Takedown, one white, one other. Deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature planeswalker, or it enters as a land. It's just utility. I don't think decks are going to do really well if you put too many of these cards in the deck, but the fact that it can smooth out your draws is definitely notable. Kazil's Fury, one red, two other. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature. Kazil's Fury deals damage equal to sacrifice creature's power to any target, and then again, a land on the other side. I do think that this is interesting. However, he has to sacrifice a creature, power to any target. It's a fling. It's a more expensive fling with a land on the side. Will it be impactful? Time will tell. Get munched. Oh my gosh. Instant. This spell costs one less if an opponent controls no basic lands. Destroy target creature. And of course, the other side of the card is a land. Really interesting. The fact that it's a destroy spell does make it very relevant. Now, it is a more expensive destroy spell, but the fact that it can be a land, I don't know. Am I being duped? I think it's really good. We're going to talk about Bolt lands soon. 3/3 for 3 here. That's just vanilla draft chafe. This is a good card. One white, four other. Landfall, when a land enters the battlefield under your control, tap target permanent and opponent controls. It's 4/4 for 5. With a huge upside in a limited environment. Save your lands for when your opponent plays big creatures later in the game. If we were playing like Two-Headed Giant, one of our favorite formats, this would definitely be one of the cards I'd put into the deck as a common. Shatter Skull Smashing, 2 red and X. So this is going to be one of the Bolt lands, and this is Mythic. Deals X damage divided as you choose among up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. If X is 6 or more, Shatter Skull Smashing deals twice X damage divided as you choose among them instead. So really nice removal spell here, really nice mythic spell. However, it is a sorcery, but it is very good. And the fact that unlike the other Modal DFCs that we've seen, this one can enter if you pay 3 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. So it can enter untapped, and they're calling it Bolt lands because you essentially lightning bolt yourself in order to play it. But if you're playing a deck that, can mitigate that loss of life, these can be very, very strong and very, very good. The fact that this can be a land or a really good removal spell, among creatures or planeswalkers is very notable. So I do think that these are the kind of cards that are going to go into eternal formats. I think these are the kind of cards that are going to transfer over into Pioneer for sure. They'll probably find a home in some modern decks as well. Yeah, I'm interested. I'm interested in these. These I'm much more excited about than the ones that enter and are mandatory tapped. Cragplate Baloth. 2 green, 5 other, kicker, 1 green, 2 other. This spell can't be countered. Hexproof haste. If Crag Plate Baloth was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 4 1/1 counters on it. Ooh, it's expensive, but it's pretty good. Limited bomb, yes. Inscription of Ruin, 1 black, 2 other. For sorcery, it can be kicked for 2 black and 2 more for 7 total. But you can choose one. If the spell was kicked, choose any number instead. It's got a Mind Rot on it. Target opponent discards 2 cards, or return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or destroy target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less. So lots of utility on this card. If you were ever in a million years going to run Mind Rot in a deck, Inscription of Ruin is a strictly better Mind Rot with a lot of upside and a lot of versatility. I do like this extended art version of the card. However, extended art is just a new thing. It's just part of the Magic multiverse. So we see the regular version of the card. Royal Eruption, 1 red, 1 other. With kicker 5, Royal Eruption deals 3 damage to any target. If the spell was kicked, it deals 5 damage instead. A really nice limited removal spell that gets better later in the game. We see the showcase variant of it here. Attended Healer, 1 white, 3 other. Core Cleric, 2/3. Whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. Another target cleric gains lifelink until end of turn. It has the lifelink built in. However, it does have to target clerics, and it can't target itself. Whenever you gain life for the first time, though, creating a 1/1 white cat, this is a go wide card. It is a little bit expensive, so for me, it does look like a great limited addition to any kind of deck. We've had some people ask, what is limited? So I'll briefly talk about that. That's when you're doing like sealed or draft. Sealed is when you like go to a pre-release and you build a deck out of the packs that you open. Draft is when you go and you crack 3 packs and you pass them around with people in like a pod between 6 to 8 people. It can sometimes have 10 or 11 people. But yeah, anytime you're cracking packs and building a deck, that is limited. You're not building a constructed deck. You're not seeking out the cards and building a deck with a specific purpose. You're creating a deck out of the cards that you open, and you're doing the best to win with what you got. It's one of my favorite ways to play. Let's talk about Expedition Champion. 1 red, 2 other. Expedition Champion gets +2/+0 as long as you control another warrior. Good limited card. Has some good upside. It could be a 4/3 if you have another warrior. Seems strong. 4/3 for 3 is good. Merfolk Falconer, 2 blue, 3 other. For 4/4, flying whenever you cast a kicked spell, scry 2. So the spell does have to be kicked, but a nice little scry built in there that gives you velocity, help you dig through the deck. Here's a card that, man, I'm very excited about this card, and I talked to Joel about it as well, and he's very excited about it. It's an all-star. As far as cEDH goes, Thieving Skydiver, this is what we're talking about when we said earlier in the video, there's a new card that's going to be excellent in cEDH, which is competitive EDH. What you need to know about cEDH is that it really values low CMC spells. Spells that are very good for a very small amount of mana. Spells that have very strong effects. It values cards that are essentially best in slot. And the fact that Thieving Skydiver, 1 blue, 1 other, 2/1, with kicker X can't be 0, for a flyer. Merfolk Rogue, so 2 relevant creature types. When Thieving Skydiver enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, gain control of target artifact with converted mana cost X or less. If that artifact is an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver. So huge upside right there. If it's an equipment, you attach it to the Skydiver. However, what comes to mind for me is Soul Rings, Mana Crypts. There is a lot that you can steal simply for 3 mana. So you're getting a 2/1 flyer. Now you combine this with a card like Crystal Shard, and the fact that you can bounce this and then play it again and permanently take all of your opponent's mana rocks is what makes this card so potent. In a competitive format, being able to take your opponent's mana acceleration, their mana rocks, that's going to put you in the driver's seat to win that game. So even though a 2/1 flyer isn't exactly impactful in EDH, the ability on this card just makes it an auto-include in my opinion. If you feel differently, please let me know, but I think the card is just absolute gas. And again, if it was kicked, gain control of target artifact, and if it's an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver. So for 5, you're taking any sword forever. The card gets better and better later in the game as well. All right, let's move on to Disenchant. 1 white, 1 other. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. We don't need to talk about it. All right, moving on to Kargan Intimidator, 1 red, 1 other for 3/1. Cowards can't block warriors. We all know what that means. For 1, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Kargan Intimidator gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Target creature becomes a coward until end of turn. Target warrior gains trample until end of turn. So some good versatility on here. The fact that it can make itself unblockable on a board that isn't too wide is notable. I think this card will definitely see some play. I think it's very, very strong. It has something to sink mana into, so it gets better when you have less cards in hand. It's something that you can do things with later in the game once you've exhausted all of your resources. It's also one of those cards that you can bluff with, because when you leave mana open and you go into an attack phase with a bunch of utility on the card, it doesn't say you have to do this before your attack phase. You can do this in response to blocks. You can do this in response to damage. There's a lot that can go on here. Let's talk about Iridescent Hornbeetle, 1 green, 4 other for a 3/4 at the beginning of your end step. Create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each 1/1 counter you've put on creatures under your control this turn. Good limited card like we've talked about. And now let's talk about the blue Bolt land that I'm very excited about. 3 blue, 4 other for sorcery. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand +1. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. And obviously on the other side, it is a Bolt land. You can pay 3 life. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. It simply taps for blue mana. So a card that I probably wouldn't run if it didn't have the versatility of the land on the other side. But in a control deck that's drawing a lot of cards, I can easily see this being like a 2 of inclusion. If you have one early, you're probably going to go ahead and play it as a land. And late game, you might go ahead and cast this huge draw spell that's going to get you a lot of velocity and win you the game. You combine this with a pesky card like Teferi and you do it at instant speed, and then oh man, let's not even talk about that. Next card, Marasa Sproutling, 1 green, 2 other for a 3/3. It has Kicker for 1 green and 1 other. When it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target card with a Kicker ability from your graveyard to your hand. Oh my gosh. Excellent card in Limited. The person in Limited that wins is the person that is able to outgun their opponent with resources. Being able to answer your opponents when they have strong creatures and being able to continue to put creatures on the board when your opponents remove them. So anything that can get something back from the yard is something that you really do want to play in a Limited experience. Let's talk about Morog, Fury of Akum. 2 red, 4 other for 6/6. Each creature control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. Landfall, when a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of your combat, untap all creatures you control. That is pretty strong. It's expensive for 6/6. However, if you get to it, it's probably going to win you the game. If you could play 1 land with this card and you have a board with a couple dudes on it, Landfall is a strong effect. We started playing when original Zendikar came out, and I just remember, oh my gosh, there was this one card, Baleth Woodcrasher, that I thought was good, and I sometimes look back on that card and I go, what was I thinking? It's just such a high converted. All right, let's talk about Lithiform Blight, 1 black, 1 other for an uncommon enchantment. Enchant land. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card so it cantrips and replaces itself. We like that here at Jake and Joel. Enchanted land loses all land types and abilities and has tap to add waste. And it has pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any color. So it has a City of Brass attached to it. But what this is going to do is this is going to shut down all those pesky land types like when Azcanta transforms. This shuts down anything like Maze of Ith. However, it does let Maze of Ith then actually float mana. So maybe Maze of Ith gets an upgrade from this card, in a way. Archon of Emeria, 1 white, 2 other for 2/3 flyer. Each player can't cast more than 1 spell each turn. Non-basic lands your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. This is a kind of card that we've seen printed before, similar effects. We get this often. What this does is it slows your opponent down. If you're playing the control players like to cast multiple spells each turn. This hurts a control player, and the fact that it hoses non-basics, it makes your opponent go slower. So this is a great sideboard card. However, 2/3 flyer for 3 is nothing to shake a stick at. Resolute Strike, 1 white. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If it's a warrior, you may attach equipment to it. Good common. Phylath, World Sculptor, 1 green, 1 red, 4 other. Legendary creature elemental, 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each basic land you control. It has landfall as well. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put 4 1/1 counters on target plant you control. I mean, this definitely rewards basic lands being in your deck, and in a green-red deck, that's not going to be super difficult to achieve. Also, in this current standard format, you're going to be able to ramp into this, I'm sure, as early as turn 4. So it's a nice card that goes wide. I think it should see some play. I also really, really like the showcase variant of Violath here. I think that is really well done. I love that frame, the diamond. Cinderclasm 1 red, 1 other for an instant with Kicker red. Cinderclasm deals 1 damage to each creature. If it was kicked, it deals 2 damage to each creature instead. Not bad. It's a more expensive Pyroclasm. However, if the creatures have 1 toughness and you have creatures that have 2 toughness, a little bit of versatility never hurts. Next card we have here is Lull Mage's Familiar. 1 blue, 1 green, 1 other for 2/4. And it's a mana dork. Whenever you cast a kick spell, you gain 2 life. Comes with a little bit of life gain attached to it. Risen Riptide, 1 blue, 2 other. For an 0/5, whenever you cast a kick spell, Risen Riptide has base power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn. So this is the kind of card that you can pull some serious tricks with. Being able to kick a spell in response, give it +5 power, block something. Again, it's a card that just screams limited to me. I don't think anybody's going to be building Risen Riptide into an actual deck. However, it could pop up in sideboards. Cunning Geyser Mage, 1 blue, 2 other for 3/2, has Kicker for 1 blue and 2 more. Whenever Cunning Geyser Mage enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return up to 1 other target creature to its owner's hand. So return that Colossal Dreadmaw or whatever big, huge creature they just played with the Cunning Geyser Mage. If this had flash, that would be just, shenanigans. Spare Supplies 2 for an artifact. Spare Supplies enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. I love that. And you could sacrifice it to draw a card. I could actually see this seeing some standard play. 2 cards is a big deal. And the fact that it enters and you automatically draw 1, this is like the kind of thing for me, like this kind of spell really does stick out to me. However, I do think about cards like, Thrill of Possibility or anything like Cathartic Reunion where you're paying the 2, you have to discard some cards. However, you don't have to discard with this. So for 2, if you don't really have much to do, you play this, you net a card, and then later on in the game when you don't have anything else to do, you could sacrifice it to draw another card. I don't hate Spare Supplies. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Need or Greed. 1 blue, 4 other sorcery. Look at the top X cards of your library where X is 3 plus the number of creatures in your party. Put 3 cards from among them into your hand and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So the fact that there's a 3+ on this is really nice. So you don't have to have a lot of creatures going on in your party to get something out of this. You could have 0 creatures in your party and you could just look at the top 3 and then just put them into your hand. However, for a draw spell that's sorcery speed, that seems really, really bad. This just seems kind of like a limited card as well. Blood Beckoning, 1 black. Next, we have Blood Beckoning, 1 black with Kicker 3, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. If it was kicked, instead return 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. This is the kind of spell that more and more in Limited, I'm starting to see people really, really like this kind of spell. It allows you to kind of just throw creatures onto the battlefield, let your opponent remove them, and then you know that later on in the game you're going to have a Blood Beckoning and you're going to be able to get those creatures back, put them on the battlefield again, and then most likely your opponent isn't going to have that same suite of removal that they have early on in the game. And again, it's card advantage. So for 4 mana, you're getting 2 creatures back and you get to pick what they are. Hint, get the best ones. Haggard Constrictor enters battlefield with 2 1/1 counters on it. Each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it has Menace. So for counters matters, this card can be good. Oblivion Hunger, 1 black, 1 other. Target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Draw a card. If that creature has a 1/1 counter on it, again, counters matters. Subtle Strike, 1 black, 1 other. Choose 1 or both. Target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, or put a 1/1 counter on target creature. So far, it seems like black is going to have a lot of the counter synergy in this set. This is Zendikar, 1 green, 3 other. Enchant land. Enchanted land is a 4/4 elemental creature with reach and haste. It's still a land. Whenever enchanted land dies, return that card to its owner's hand. Rabid Bite, 1 green, 1 other. We know this card. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Brush Fire Elemental, 1 green, 1 red for a 1/1 with haste. Can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Landfall. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So not much to look at on the surface. However, that landfall ability is very strong. You could kind of have, like in a constructed format, you could bluff. You can have a Fabled Passage on the battlefield, go to swing with this. They block it, sacrifice Fabled Passage, go get a land, pump this. And then if you have other landfall effects that you're able to cast at instant speed, we know that there's shenanigans that can make sorcery spells instant. However, we also know that Growth Spiral is one of those cards as well that is going to synergize really well with Brushfire Elemental, especially in like a Pioneer kind of format. Kaza Royal Chaser, we've already talked about this card. Utility Knife. For 1, when it enters the battlefield, you attach it to a creature. It's just simply a +1/+1. Has an equip of 3. Definitely a limited card, but really cool. They essentially printed a Swiss Army knife. Makindi Ox we've talked about. We just talked about Brushfire Elemental. You can go ahead and take a look at their showcase frames here. Pretty cool again. Really neat showcase frames. These are going to be popping up in all the collector's boosters. We've talked about Tabarak's Hope's Demise. We've talked about Into the Royal. If you haven't seen those other videos, there's a Zendikar Rising playlist. You can go in there and watch all of the spoilers that we've already covered. Relic Robber. 1 red, 2 other for 2/2. Haste. When Relic Robber deals damage to a player, that player creates a 0/1 colorless Goblin Construct artifact creature token with this creature can't block. And at the beginning of your upkeep, this creature deals 1 damage to you. So it essentially creates you 0/1s that you can't block with that hurt you. So if you could sacrifice them, if you're playing like a Witch's Oven deck, then you can thank your opponent for an easy way to create food. Cragplate Baloth, we already talked about this card. Has a lot of keywords on it. It is very expensive, but if you can play it, it will likely win you the game. Hexproof is one of these things that Wizards of the Coast is trying to move away from, so we see it less and less per set. However, this is the big, giant, hexproof creature, can't be countered. With Cragplate Baloth, they essentially made Carnage Tyrant 1 mana more expensive. Yesterday, we talked about Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. Inscription of Abundance. 1 green, 1 other. Kicker. For 1 green and 2, choose 1. If the spell was kicked, choose any number instead. Put 2 1/1 counters on target creature. Target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control, or target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So these charms, these are essentially just charms, but these are very, very good. I mean, it does cost 5 mana to use all of those abilities, but put 2 1/1 counters on target creature and the target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Both of those being instant speed, this card has a lot of trickery built into it, and this card is very, very, very strong. And the life gain is nothing to shake a stick at. You know, late game, if you cast this for 5 and you're able to gain, you know, the 6 life back from the Cragplate Baloth, that's likely going to be the biggest creature on your battlefield. Or I think this card is very, very strong. Yasharn, Impeccable Earth, 1 white, 1 green, 2 other. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic forest card and a basic plains card. Reveal those cards, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library. Players can't pay life or sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. Oh man. This card is good. The fact that when it enters, it's going to search out 2 cards, so it thins out 2 cards from your deck. Yeah, it's really, really good. And it shuts down strategies where you pay life and sacrifice permanents. Like, this is just really, really good. What do you think of Yasharn? Because I'm pretty sure this is the standout, other than our Skydiver that we talked about earlier. And I don't know if Joel covered this card, so we'll go ahead and cover it. 1 black, 1 blue, 3 other. Zareth San, the Trickster, a 4/4 with Flash. Flash is good. It has this ability built in. Return an unblocked attacking rogue you control to its owner's hand. Put Zareth, the Trickster, from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, so it enters the battlefield. You know, this is what rogues do. When it deals combat damage to a player, you may put target permanent card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So this is very strong. It really does incentivize your opponent to block all rogues. If you are in blue-black and you are attacking with a rogue, your opponents are very quickly going to realize this might be Zareth Sand deck. So I think there's some pretty heat spoilers today. I think the standout for me is the Skydiver, Thieving Skydiver that we talked about earlier in the video. What is the standout for you? What card are you the most excited about? We're closing the book on day 4 of Zendikar Rising Spoilers. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did, click like, click subscribe. Like I said earlier, check us out on Patreon. We have more spoilers coming up. I personally am going to be doing a review on Zendikar Rising Collector Boosters. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you're on the fence, make sure you're subscribed because that video is going to be coming out in the next few days. As always, we appreciate you spending your time here at Jake and Joel Are Magic. I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend, and until next time, I'm tapped out.